Hopefully everyone knows who these gentlemen are, but if you don't, James is the co-founder of AST and one of the co-founders of the Context-Driven School of Software Testing. You probably know him from Lessons Learned in Software Testing and Buccaneer Scholar, the 2 books that he's published. He also created and teaches rapid software testing along with Michael Bolton. Michael Bolton is the co-author of Rapid Software Testing as well. Personally, I know them. I've learned a lot from them. I took rapid software testing with Michael Bolton probably back in 2013 at Star West, and I got to peek in on him at Star West this year as well. I've taken the online classes from James Bach for the rapid software testing online, which is great. You guys should take a look at that stuff. A little plug for AST. We do have our conference, CAST 2020, coming up in August 3rd through 6th. If you go ahead and use your camera, you can take a picture of that QR code and it'll take you right to the website so you can learn more about CAST and possibly register. It's in Austin, Texas. It's going to be a lot of fun. So having said that, I'm going to throw it over to James here. Do you want to share your screen, James?
I would like to do that if I saw anything on my screen that I could share it.
I remember this.
Do you have? There we go. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. That's the screen I want to share, and it should be sharing. And you can do this. All right, there we go. Exactly like CNN, just as smooth as that. All right, hi folks. Since I have all the technology on my system and have prepared all these displays, I'm going to be the main presenter. Michael will constantly interrupt me and take over as he sees fit as a full spectrum color commentator. Michael and I enjoy testing together, and this is a particularly kind of fun thing for us to do, is a close analysis of one of our test sessions. Say something, Michael.
Something.
Okay. So moving on. What do we mean by a testopsy? We are talking about an autopsy for testing. We are talking about taking a very close look at a session of testing. And you can do a testopsy based on just a few minutes of testing. I have done as little as 7 minutes of testing where I've broken it down into 2-second increments and analyzed every single thing that happened. I've also done a testopsy of a whole day of testing, but not to that level of detail. The basic idea is, and you don't have to do recording for this, but I think the best way that I've found that it works is I record a session of testing on video or on a screen capture, and then we go through the recording. We note everything that we did. We try to describe that with specific words. Sometimes that means that we invent terms for things. Right, Michael? We've invented lots of things for RST by watching ourselves test.
Also, this one was particularly fruitful. This is an instance where in the past, I'm not sure we've ever done a video testopsy with each other. We've done testopsies.
We've done live testopsies.
Yeah,
we've
done
a
live
video testopsy. This was the first time we've tried to do a video testopsy with each other. That's right.
So the advantage of this one is that the participants can step back and observe their own work. In a live testopsy, the typical thing is for somebody to be testing and for the
commentator,
the review, the commentator and the observer to be separate from that process. So the person doing the testing and the person analyzing the testing are to some degree distant. In this one, both of us could do a deep dive on this, and that was super handy.
Right. Yeah. So we've done this on stage. In fact, the original idea for this presentation is one of us was going to test and the other one was going to comment on their testing in real time. But then we we decided to do something a little more controlled. And what we did is we found a video that we made of ourselves back in July that we didn't make for the purposes of a testopsy. We just were recording it because I wanted to make sure that I captured all the information because I might need it later. We were doing testing in preparation.
Sorry.
We were doing testing in preparation for the Rapid Software Testing Applied online course. So we were doing real testing that we needed to do ahead of a class where we were going to teach using this tool called Medomatic. So you're going to see us a test Medomatic. Since we had that recording, we had it all ready to go. We decided to take that recording and just do a testopsy of that. In so doing, we discovered new bugs that we didn't see the first time in real time. We discovered some new insights about testing, and we're eager to share them with you. All right. So let's first look at our session report. Now, what a session report is in this case is this is a report of what we did in that test session. And if I can switch to, well, I just won't switch. I'll just let it run. I'm trying to.
So what we've got here,
5 minutes long. Yeah, go ahead.
The charter was to analyze Medomatic in preparation for deep testing. This was for the second or third day, probably the third day of the Rapid Software Testing Applied class that James teaches online. And we had already done some observation and some interaction with this product, but we wanted, among other things, to create a product coverage outline that could allow us to select a target for deep analysis. We wanted to look at some aspect of the product deeply. And one of the insights we've had through the course of developing this testopsy report is that deep testing is testing that is intended to maximize the probability of finding every elusive bug that matters. So that is the goal of this, is to prepare for that kind of testing. But on the way, we found a bunch of things about the product that surprised us. And of course, since we were testing in order to learn how to test the product deeply, we found a lot of bugs.
So what you see on the screen, I was looking for the control on this thing so that I could scroll it back and forth, but it's not letting me do that. I don't know what's going on. So you saw it scroll by. You saw that this is the written report that I prepared immediately after the session, which we show in class to say this is an example of a session test report. Now, I prepared this without closely looking at the video that we then looked at just yesterday and the day before. So this is just mostly, this report you see here is based on my memory. So it's interesting to now to do the testopsy.
Not just on your memory, actually, James. There's it was also assisted by the Mindmap, I think. Right? You used the Mindmap.
Yes, and thank you for reminding me, because let me show you that Mindmap. This is the Mindmap that Michael was creating during that test session. So normally in a non-testopsy situation, this is all you'd have. You'd have the session report, if you're used to doing session reports, and then you'd have whatever else you created during this. And during that session, Michael created this mind map of all these features. So this was an analysis session to create a mind map of the elements of the product so that we could systematically test those elements. He's got information about testing here, about our process, and then down here is stuff about the product. So normally this would be all you'd see. You'd just see the result. But now we get into the actual testopsy. So what I've done is I have prepared a set of clips of different things we did. So I'll start playing some of these clips. This is near the beginning. This is in fast motion here. I've sped this up 16 times. This is the beginning where Michael is getting ready to take his notes. So you see that he's got an idea in mind of how he wants to organize these notes.
So what you see there is in the center where it says test session Medomatic. What I'm intending to do is to create a coverage outline based around that central node. Up in the upper right there, you'll see something. It's a little bit small, but what I've got is separate from the product coverage outline in another tree on the same map. I've got my notes about the testing itself. That includes, whoa, where does it go? That includes metadata about the testing session. It includes, forward there a little bit more from James, if you can. A little bit more. There we go. So these days, what I'm putting in my listing like that, preparing for a session report, bugs that I found, or that we found, issues. An issue is something that threatens the value of the testing effort. Then there's risks that I can see associated with the product. Then, oh, that's nice. Ooh,
Yeah,
very good.
let's just move over to
good
up here. Where?
All right,
there it is. Bugs, issues, risks. You can see it better there.
Yeah, test ideas, tools, and general notes. Now, I'd set that out as a kind of template that is parallel to the information that's going to go into the session sheet later on. But what I found out is that it's kind of cool to have that immediately at hand, visible in the same visual space as my product coverage outline, but they're not the same thing.
Okay, we got a lot of stuff to get through.
So
bear that in mind, my friend.
Yes,
because there's so many cool things that we found. Here's a real quick look at in fast motion. This is me. I decided I would drive. Michael was the scribe. This is Michael's screen. He is typing out the different features of the product as I'm walking through the product. I'm walking through Medomatic, and I am calling out what I see, and Michael's just taking notes as fast as he can. So Michael's in charge of creating this thing. He's creating it. I'm not actually seeing his screen. I'm looking at the product, and that's a way I usually like to do it. I usually am the one taking the notes, and when I'm pairing with people, I like when Michael takes the notes when I'm working with him. But usually, I'm so fussy about the notes that I don't like anybody else doing them. I'm glad that Michael is fussier than I am.
One thing that you don't see is I've got the product on another screen. So I've got a screen running and I've got the notes on the other side. And James, I've got in yet another place, I can see what James is up to. So I'm often trying to corroborate stuff that he's doing in real time.
Now, here is a moment that we found that we thought was particularly interesting. I'm going to play this clip, and I'm going to play it with some audio if the audio plays. Let's see if it will.
Now, I've just used my copy all links extension to copy all links on the front page.
Oh, nice.
And this reminds me that there's also a terms and conditions link.
Okay, just a minute. It's a copy all links tool. What is that tool called?
It's a extension called copy links for Chrome.
Links?
It copies all links it turns all links into text and lets you copy them, paste them into a thing. Here, I guess I'll try sharing my screen to see if this blows away the recording. Here we go. Okay. I'm trying to share my screen. Are you seeing my screen?
Okay, so what's interesting there is, first of all, I'm using a tool to help me explore. We constantly use tools to help us explore. This is why Michael and I do not use the term automated testing. We think it's a ridiculous term. We don't automate our testing. We use various tools to help us test, but we're always in charge of our testing. If we're going to call it testing, then we're going to say we're in charge of our testing. And just like a programmer's in charge of the programming, there's not automated programming. We're in charge of our testing, but we absolutely use tools to help us do various things. And in this case, this tool has pulled all these links out, and then for the next few minutes, we go over those links to make sure that we've added those things to the product coverage outline. Now, Michael wasn't familiar with that tool, so this is an example of how in a test session, frequently you're apprising each other, if you're working with more than one person, of different tools that you know about. It's a great way to find out about things.
It's amazing. I found in organizations how much of that data is assumed to be known and is not. People tend to sometimes be a little bit circumspect about the tools that they're hoarding, not intentionally, but they don't talk about them as much as they might.
Now, let me fast forward to this little moment, which only took us a few seconds, but then during the testopsy, Michael and I discussed this for like 20 minutes.
But this is interesting though, because right here we've got a map of claimed features.
Yeah.
So
See how long that took? That was just a few seconds. But we ended up talking about that quite a long time because we realized that, well, many times the product gives you a list of its own features. But the thing is you can't just trust that. So we talked about assumptions, validated versus unvalidated assumptions, and how that works in testing. We must have talked about that for 20 minutes or something.
At least. But the other thing is, I'm suddenly wondering now, just now, because this testopsy in a way is kind of continuing as we're having this conversation. Did I ever take that? Because it's really clear to me as I look at it that I've selected it. So I intended to paste it into the Mindmap. I did?
I think you did. I think I saw that in the video.
Okay.
All right. Good. So now I want to show you what happened next. Now that something big happened. In fact, I think what we should do is I'm going to switch to a different thing now. I want to show you a different view of this, guys. Here's what I want to show you. See this? I've made a map of the discoveries that we made during the testopsy. So what you've seen so far is we started the testopsy. We discussed what tools we might want to use. We played what our basic method was. We played the video at high speed and slowed it down whenever we saw anything interesting on the screen. And then we would listen to ourselves, and then we would talk. We noticed Michael's note-taking process. We noticed the tool use. We noticed Michael's acknowledgement of the product map, which you just saw. This then led to a discussion about validated and unvalidated assumptions. But then this happened. Then we noticed the bug cascade. There was a 20-minute period in this 75-minute session where we got overwhelmed with bug reports. And we thought that was really an interesting phenomenon. And we decided we would focus the rest of our testopsy just on analyzing what happened. Because what we saw was, let's see, let's move here. Yeah, because what we saw was, let's roll back to here. We saw that we had multiple bugs, multiple overlapping investigations that interrupted each other. So we kept going into some kind of confusion. We saw that the process of reporting bugs interrupted the process of analyzing the product. We realized later that we didn't know enough about the product to sort out what were bugs from what weren't bugs, and that was hindering our bug investigations. And we saw later that in all of this confusion, we missed several bugs that were staring at us right on the screen. Other things we saw, we didn't see until quite a bit after they showed up on the screen.
It was really amazing to review this because in the thick of it, almost by definition, you can't keep track of all the stuff that's coming at you in this blizzard. something goes onto the stack, it's exactly like this. That's
feels like a money booth. You know those cash grab booths? That's what it felt like, didn't it?
It was in a storm of stuff that was tornadoing around us, and when you're trying to grab at stuff as it's blowing around like that, you grab onto something and then you drop it as you grab onto something else.
That led to this. We coined a term, mutually disruptive processes, to talk about this interesting idea that we hadn't noticed and named as such before. So we believe we've coined this as a term, mutually disruptive. We Googled it lightly and didn't see anyone else talking about this kind of thing. But we bet that this is all through testing. We bet you've experienced this too and maybe didn't have a word for it. So this notion of mutually disruptive processes, when the processes are all inside of you, creates self-disruption, where there's turbulence inside your own processes, inside your own work, that it might feel that it's wrong or that it's bad, but we think it might be essential. It might be just fundamental to the nature of the fact that you're trying to do different things at once, and these processes get in each other's way. And that creates the money booth effect, which is the condition of productivity collapse that results from too much self-disruption. And so what we would like you to do, my friends out there, is to begin by forgiving yourself for this, because it's not your fault. Yes, you can practice, and yes, you can mitigate some of the effects of this, but we've been practicing this for years, and we don't think that we can get rid of this. And that led to a second thing.
Susan says that this is ADHD, also known as ADHD. And I would like to issue a caution on that. It's not a D. In fact, it's neither D. It's not a deficit of attention, and it's not a disorder. I mean, it might feel disordered, but it's more like the natural course of things.
I would say it's a disorder if you feel disordered. If you if you feel like it's a problem, then it's a problem. But I have long ago reconciled myself to the fact that my mind flits from one thing to another, and I've just arranged my life so that that's a strength, that's a feature and not a bug. I've taken on a kind of job where it's good that I'm distractible. So anyway,
for me, it's kind of like saying that, gee, waterfalls are noisy and turbulent. And gee, wouldn't it be nicer if they could all come in a nice straight pipe? Well, they could, but nature doesn't work that way, you know?
Yeah, well, let's watch the big pipe fall. You know, it's not so interesting.
Niagara Pipe.
Listen to how silent it is and how it is not wet. It's an elevation change in a pipe. Okay, so this led us to talk about something that we call necessary confusion. Necessary confusion is also related to something that Michael and I call the bootstrap conjecture. The bootstrap conjecture can be summarized as you never do anything right the first time.
If it's non-trivial.
If it's non-trivial. If it's anything that's hard to do is not going to be done right the first time. You're going to have to try it and iterate. And in fact, all of Agile is basically based on the bootstrap conjecture. And what that means to us, one of the corollaries of that is that certain kinds of confusion and certain amount of confusion is absolutely necessary. You can't be blaming yourself for it. You have to embrace it and work through it. Now I'll bring in one more thing here before moving back to the video. Let's see, here we go. And that is, we noticed the power of video review. Boy, it really came through when we were doing video review, how we were seeing bugs that we hadn't seen the first time through. And I already knew about this, but it got reinforced for me. I can tell you that whenever I'm on a really, really important test project, and usually for me, these are court cases, I video all the testing I do, and then I watch the video to get every last drop of value out of every bit of testing. Now, this isn't feasible to do in an ordinary commercial project. It's only feasible if you have a situation where you have a limited time with a project, with a product, and you have to get everything you possibly can out of that limited time. But it's still useful.
By the same token, I observed that it's probably pretty cheap to record your testing sessions, and if you never look at them, big deal. At storage space these days is incredibly cheap. But the value of having this was amazing.
Just having them, even if you don't look back, even if you once in a while look back at them, I just have a video camera for every professional project that I do now, and then we also use screen recording. So all this green stuff you see here is stuff that we got out of the Testopsy, and we're not even done with that yet. But I want to go back to the video because I want to show you some examples now, because everything you just saw us talk about there is substantiated by what actually happened in the test process. So let's see an example of what we're talking about here. Let's see. Let's do this. This is immediately before the bug cascade hit.
All right, so what we got to do is characterize the features on this, and so the features on this include the default times are displayed.
Okay, hang on a sec. That's a different page, right? So that's a time selection pop-up underneath meeting creation.
It's underneath meeting creation. It's in the time block mode.
Okay.
So for time block mode, you've got to select times.
Right.
Unlike just selecting AM and PM.
Right.
So here I'm trying to figure out how to take notes.
Add under time selection is time zone, which I think time zone doesn't appear. Yeah, it only appears in time block mode. So time zone selection is in time block mode. So
a lot of the test session is just this. It just goes on like this, where we're just trying to make sense of what we see. And then we started running into bugs with this particular dialog box. And here's an example of that. There actually is audio here. I'm just not talking.
That's interesting.
So the not talking thing is significant because that's sense making going on.
Huh.
Edit.
If I add.
Now, I bet you don't know what's going on there, dear viewers. I had to watch this video clip about 25 times to try to figure out what the heck was I talking about. I don't know what to this day, I do not know what I meant when I said that's interesting. I don't see what was interesting. Something was going on in my head and I was trying to figure out what it was. And Michael didn't know. Michael even said, "What's interesting?" And I was trying to put it into words. And while I was putting into words, I was getting interrupted by the fact that there's actually a bug here, because when I tried to click add time, the time disappeared. And I was trying to make sense of that. I didn't know whether I clicked the right button or the wrong button. But watch what happens after that.
Time. I don't even know why it's selected. It looks like it's selected. Why is it selected?
So I get distracted by the selection thing.
Help, help. Ah! Click on done first. Now click somewhere else. No, not on the table. Somewhere else. Like there. Wow. That's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, there's this selection thing that doesn't go away. And not only that, it's not a regular selection. Because look,
So we're already talking about selection, but this interrupted a process where I was trying to figure out about the add time thing. So I'm trying to do this time selector window, and then we get distracted by the selection. Michael is also temporarily distracted by the fact that he doesn't understand the feature about the default times that just appeared. So then I have to explain that to him.
Money booth.
So we're starting to get this money booth thing. Here's another element from just a moment later.
So you're going to refer.
Well, what I was trying to do.
Clear day.
What I was trying to do is remove this time. Oh, okay. So I wanted to add a time.
Hey, does clear day not mean what we think it means?
So now he's talking about clear day. So I'm distracted
and I don't know
again.
Why I can't just say clear day right here. I don't understand that.
Go.
So I'm in the middle of doing something else. Michael says, "What about clear day?" And then immediately throws me off track. Now I like being thrown off track, by the way. I like that about pairing. I think it's more useful in general to have the value of somebody else noticing things and wanting you to do something than the value of, of staying on the same thing. But I have to say that I like to alternate. I like to do paired testing where I get confused and we have a lot of energy. And then I like to alternate and just test by myself for a while so I can focus and then go back and test with another person. Because I get more energy when I'm testing with other people and I get different ideas. Here's another part of that.
The 13th.
Clear day.
Go to the 13th.
Yeah.
Try adding a time. Now hit clear day. And you notice that the purple thing stays now.
Now it's gone.
And
I think the purple thing is supposed to show that you're on that day, and it's some sort of formatting bug which we can reproduce. Okay, so I just refreshed the screen. Let's see if we can reproduce this. So if I just say done, just do it and say done.
No problem.
But what if I click over here?
So what you see here is that I've gotten onto the thread of an inquiry. I'm pursuing a specific inquiry, and now my ideas in my own head have gotten sorted out so that I can systematically create an experiment. That's what you see there is the beginning of systematic experimentation instead of blundering around and wondering what the heck is going on. And now I'm trying to get Michael involved in that. He's involved in that. Now we're more in sync in this part of the video. This led us to a more general concern, which is right here about the non-modality of this dialogue.
Look at this. I mean, I'm over here adding times, and it still is over here thinking I'm on this day, even though I'm adding times over here. So I just think this should be modal. Maybe they think it is modal and it's not.
Okay, I'll add a note to that.
Okay, so let me just jump to the end of this cascade of problems. Almost to the end. Here's one more thing I want to show you, and then I'll jump to the end.
So if I just keep saying add time, so it's not letting me add that time. Wait, why isn't it letting me add that time? It should let me add that time.
Change it. Okay. Now change it to 8 o'clock and 9:30 again. Add time.
Why is it not letting me add the time? Is it not letting me add any time at all?
You should be able to add multo blocco.
All right, so let me jump right to the end. This is the fun part.
Now, what happens when we send this message, send this meeting? What do we see? Or are we talking about?
So we're trying to set up a meeting now with all the times we put in. Let's see what happens.
Let's do that. on this.
Go.
Oh, fuck.
500 error.
So server crash. That's what we. After all that, we submitted our data, and it turned out there was a back-end bug. We somehow inadvertently found ourselves able to force it to take bad data, and then it crashed. So then the next thing we did, which I won't show you the video of, is we went to the back-end logging system and verified that it was the server that received it received duplicate data or something in a request, and that was what caused the problem. So out of all of that, here's something that we discovered. And here we go, right here. It's ta-da. We conceived of a new thing that we're going to be talking about in our classes. We call it the bug reporting sieve. And what we basically did is we noticed that there is a set of
stages or filters,
gates, you might say, that that we have to go through. Let me here it is. And if I switch this to pen mode, I will have better ability. Okay,
this is the thing that we tried a little bit earlier in this.
It's gonna work. It's gonna work. Here we go.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
Watch.
Whoa! It's actually
working.
working.
The normal situation. The normal situation is that in order to report a bug, the bug has to exist. It has to be producible. It has to be.
Whoa. Well, not too quick. By producible, which means we've got to be in a circumstance where the bug can actually manifest. For instance, if there's a bug in the product's handling of stuff under Firefox and we're running on Chrome, the bug might exist, but it's not producible.
Yeah, or if it's a fault in code that never gets executed, it's dead code. It's not producible, even though you'll find it in a code review. So it's got to be producible. It must. So notice that producible is not the same thing as reproducible. Those are different things, but of course it's related. You have to notice it. You have to comprehend it after you notice it. You have to authenticate it. Michael and I have a little dispute about this word, but you have to decide that it's actually a bug is what I mean when I write authenticate.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out a really good word for saying, all right,
it's a bug.
Bug.
It's
right.
Definitely a bug. I mean, I know what's going on. I noticed something. I know what's going on, and what's going on is wrong. And then you report it. Now this is the sieve. All these gates have to be passed through, or you can't report a bug. But what the insight that we came to from watching that 20-minute section of us stumbling over ourselves as we investigate several bugs, and then there were several of them that we saw that we didn't report because we lost track of them. There were some things we didn't see. What we realized is that, well, sometimes a bug exists and is reproducible, observable. You notice it, but you don't comprehend it. Sometimes you comprehend it, but then you don't realize it's a bug. Sometimes you realize it's a bug and forget to report it. Other times, you see something that's not a bug, it's producible, observable, and then you realize when it comes time to authenticate, it's not really a bug. So you see that lots of confusing things can happen. And here's the thing that happened that is particularly interesting in this case. I saw something. I was trying to comprehend it. And while I was doing that, I saw something else that knocked the first bug off. And I ended up reporting the second one and forgetting about the first one.
That happened.
So you have like a traffic jam of bugs coming in like this.
So a question just came in that was, by producible bug, do you mean that like it has to be seen once, or no?
No, I mean that it's seeable. Producible means that it is capable of occurring. It's capable of manifesting.
So, for instance, a bug has to exist, so there has to be something wrong. For it to be producible, you've got to be able to have a set of conditions in which it can happen. So, one of the better examples of something that's exists but is not producible is there's a bug in code that never ever gets called. Dead code. So that's a bug that exists, but it's not producible, certainly not in the circumstance where that code is not altered such that the bug can ever come up. It was
in the IEEE technical language, we're talking about the distinction between a fault and a failure. A failure is the product does something wrong. A fault is something wrong in the code or in the design, a defect in construction it's a latent failure. It could be a failure, but it hasn't failed yet. So in testing can only find problems that are producible. If a problem isn't producible, testing's not going to find it. Review might find it. Static analysis might find it, but not testing. So anyway, that's what it means there. So the point is that by doing the testopsy, we came up with a set of insights. Now, one more thing I want to show you guys, and that is this. This is something we call
Progress Sim.
Progress Sim. It's part of an idea we call the secret life of testers. What I did is I analyzed everything we did in that 20-minute period during the bug cascade, and in 30-second increments, I've characterized what we actually did. And what you see is that we spent most of our time on bug investigation with only a little bit of actual progress toward the thing that we were trying to do in our test session. So our goal in the test session was to create a product coverage outline based on an understanding of the features of the product. We got 1/4 of the way through that in the 20 minutes we're analyzing right here. And the rest of the time we were distracted by bugs. This kind of analysis, where you break the amount of time you spend into 3 kinds of time, bug investigation and reporting, productive bug finding work, which is the green stuff, and yellow, which is setup and admin time, can be very useful if you are trying to get a sense and be able to explain to your managers and your coworkers why it is that you spend hours testing, but you don't feel like you get much done. When you are able to do this kind of analysis, you get really good evidence. You can walk them through it. You can, in fact, we did this with a whole week once. This is made up data. This isn't based on a real testopsy, but this is an entire week of what a week might look like for a tester, where you are black as you're spending time in meetings, and the colors are when you're trying to test. And this shows that in an entire week of testing, you might only get 1 day of testing worth of actual work done.
And wait, I don't think you meant to say that. You get actual coverage in 1 week of testing. You're doing testing work all the way through the week.
I'm distinguishing between performing tests and doing testing work.
Right. That's important. Doing testing work. That's
our clients are constantly thinking that every moment of our time is spent performing tests. But actually, a small part of our time is spent performing tests, because we get interrupted by bugs. We get interrupted by setup activities. And
so go back to the one for the testopsy there, James. Each block there being 30 seconds. What do we got? How many seconds is this in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
It's 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay.
1,200 seconds.
20 minutes of testing, ostensibly, we could cover 20 little, or, we could cover 40 featurettes, little tiny aspects of a feature, and test those things. But all that time, so much of that time is being interrupted by bug investigation and reporting, and a little tiny bit of time being interrupted by something we call setup work.
Now this isn't our whole session though. This is just 20 minutes of that 75 minutes.
Right.
That's important because the rest of it, we actually got a lot done. This is just an interesting part of our session that turned into a bug cascade.
And Chris has a question.
Yeah. So first of all, we've got about 12 minutes left, just FYI.
We can go to questions now. We can just do that.
But also, so one of the questions is like, how did you collect this data? Now, I know you said one of them was sort of just made up, but like in a given, like if you were trying to take this information and present it to your managers, how would you actually go about doing that? Does it require you to having recorded your information, or, can you talk a little bit about that?
Over the course of a week, what we would suggest people do, and you don't want to do this all the time. It would be super, super irritating, but there's a couple of ways you can do it. One is for a day or a week, set up something to an alert every 10 minutes and take a literal 5-second note on some kind of list or in some kind of notebook that you've got, your Moleskine or a computer-based notebook, or something on your phone. But every 10 minutes, take a 1 word or so a note on what you were doing over the previous 10 minutes. Super annoying to do that for even a whole day, but you don't have to do it forever all the time. Another approach is to get an intern or a sociologist, an anthropologist, to follow people around and take.
You're not going to get an anthropologist, my friend.
A student. You might be able to do that, but
I don't think so.
I've done this. I've done this as a consultant, though. As a consultant, hired me to do that. Yeah.
The important thing to understand about this is we're not talking about doing this all the time. What we're talking about is when you decide, I want to make another step toward learning how my own test process really works, then you can set aside half a day to watch yourself very carefully, to video yourself. You can also get together with other people and look very carefully at the work that you do. How you actually collect the data is, I would suggest video as the first step, but you just sit with a notebook, and you can also in real time watch somebody else test, and I've done that, and then write down what they do. I have found that I miss a lot when I do that, so that's why I prefer video, so that I can look at it very carefully. But the important thing is that it takes a lot of time to do a testopsy properly. The kind of thing that we just showed you took us probably 8 hours to analyze this 75 minutes of testing.
At least.
But we don't do this all the time. We do this. Yeah. What we were trying to point out is that we get a lot out of doing this once in a while. And by doing that, you can just by setting an alarm and taking notes for the course of 2 days, so that you just have 2 days of every 15 minutes, you've got a log of what you were doing. Just that will allow you to see patterns that you can talk about for weeks and weeks.
Here's an example. When I was at a client, I was assigned to observe testers doing testing, ostensibly. And over 2 of the sessions that I looked at, one of them was a little less than half of it was actual test coverage. And the rest of it was setup and bug investigation. On the other session, it was a mass of yellow. It was all setup work. And yet management was curious as to why testers weren't finding bugs. And when we analyzed why this stuff was yellow, the answer was that the conditions that management had set up made it really, really difficult for testers to get testing work done. This was a tricky product to set up. The server lab was far enough away from the tester that she had to get up and walk to it to make an adjustment to things in the server room. She did that 11 times over the course of a 4-hour afternoon. And in those 11 walks, each walk was 3 minutes round trip, never mind what she did when she was actually there. So, put the tester closer to the server room in cases like that was an insight that I was able to provide to that company right away.
What you see on the screen now is a formal log that I prepared for a project where I was developing a process for Microsoft.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, 1999, which goes to show you that you don't have to do this a whole lot, because what I learned by doing this one day of intensively analyzing several hours of testing, I then applied to my class. I created a lot of class materials based on what I learned from doing this. And I used an alarm that every 15 minutes automatically reminded me to say what I was doing, and took a snapshot of my notes. And then I have the snapshots of all the notes. Here's an example of the 8th. This is the 8th snapshot of my notes that was automatically kept for me. So I collected this data just one time for about 4 hours. And I learned so much about how exploratory testing works that I've been teaching based on that for a long time. So I've done different kinds, both Michael and I have done different kinds and different levels of these kinds of testopsies. And a little bit goes an amazingly long way.
We probably have a half hour's worth of new material for our class or for conference talks. In fact, expanding on the bug reporting sieve or expanding on necessary confusion, each one of those is an hour's worth of discussion and examination. So often a testopsy and results we get from it turn into a point of departure for even deeper study of a particular thing.
Let's show one more thing before we go, Michael. Here, take a look at this. Remember this?
No. What is it?
You don't remember this? This is your notes. This is your notes from Star West years ago, where you were watching me in real time and you were writing down everything that I was doing. So Michael was trying to characterize my entire test process that I did live. So this is a live testopsy. And I had you were doing this with your brother John, and I was taking a note every minute. Every minute I would try to identify what you had done in the previous minute. Right. So this is what I mean when I say Michael and I have been doing bits and pieces and different kinds of stuff like this for years. We've done it in different ways. And if you want to know, here's the bottom line. If you think Michael and I have any insights to give about testing, this is why. This is the main reason why. Because we have learned to watch our testing very closely. And we see all kinds of amazing things there that most people aren't writing about, most people aren't talking about. And I think the secret reason for that is people who write about testing don't do testopsies. They should be. They should be watching their testing very carefully, but I think they generally don't. There's other questions here we can ask answer until we're cut off. Francis asks, is there any particular recording software you recommend?
Yep.
I've used BB Test Assistant. Years ago, it was my go-to thing, but I don't know if it still exists. It costs a couple $100, and I've been reluctant to upgrade to the latest one. These days, I've been using Snagit to do videos. Or Michael and I were using Zoom. We were since we were telecommuting with each other, we just used Zoom recording, and that worked for us. But I'll tell you, when I do this really professionally, I set up a video camera, because video cameras have never lost my data, but every screen recorder tool has lost my data.
And to add on to that, so if you can use Zoom, then you can use other free ones like Google Hangouts and that kind of thing as well. Not the best quality, but you can, yeah.
I recommend do not use a GoPro camera. I tried that once. The problem is GoPro doesn't have an analog zoom. So you end up having to zoom into the screen and then it gets all pixelated. But with a regular video camera, you can set it up some distance away, do an analog zoom right into the screen, and it's great.
So another one of the questions is regarding like the video recordings, like how long do you record your sessions for? How long do you keep the data? That kind of stuff.
Well, this stuff, we never throw away the data, basically. I don't throw away the data. We just did a testopsy based on something we did in July that we just found on our disk drive. You know, like, oh, here's something. Let's do this. I'm very glad I kept this because this was wonderful doing this testopsy. You can keep about 100 days of testing video because it runs. I find it runs about 15 gig a day. So you can keep like 80 days of testing video on a terabyte drive, and terabyte drives are cheap. So I would just keep the data. Now, sometimes you work for companies that won't let you do this. I've had problems in banks where they didn't want me to do video, and I understand. But in most cases, it's not really super sensitive. Oh, one thing that happened, I found a bug once because I forgot to turn the video off. I left the video on during lunch and I came back and the thing had been staring at the screen all while I was gone. And for fun, I just ran the video back in fast motion just to see if anything happened while I was gone. And I found out that a temperature control system that was supposed to hold a temperature of a water bath at exactly a certain temperature was slowly warming up over the course of the hour. You couldn't notice it unless you played it in fast motion.
And then even for this testopsy, even for the video that we just saw, one of the things that we noticed in that bug cascade is we noticed bug after bug after bug that we had not recorded because at some point they fell through the sieve.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get a few more questions in. So do you think that observing your testing changes your testing, also known as the Hawthorne effect? And maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's when you do testing when you do testing in a pair, you're definitely testing differently than when you're alone. Because you feel the need to explain yourself, you feel the need not to waste the other person's time. So there's already a kind of a Hawthorne effect just by working with another person.
Definitely.
So there's less of that when you just do a video and you don't think about. It's easy to forget that anyone's going to look at this or that you're going to look at this later, and you just start testing and you just get into it. It's definitely different when you're testing on stage and someone's watching you, which I've done a number of times while being, commented at by Michael or my brother John. It definitely changes what you're doing. And one big thing to think about is that, and this, by the way, this has nothing to do with testopsies. This can have to do with just having the wrong kind of manager. But if you're doing something, let's say with automation, and you're having trouble making the automation work, a lot of people working with automation will pretend that it didn't happen. They'll work all night to get the automation to work, and they'll pretend that they watched movies all night because they don't want management to think that they're incompetent. They're worried that if they reveal to management just how much work it is to get this dang automation to work, then they'll say, oh, well, you must not be good at it because all those advertisements said that it's so easy to automate using XYZ tool. So if you're having problems, that must be your problem.
This is a hugely important point because I think almost everybody is lying about how hard this stuff actually is.
That's what we call the secret life
Right.
life of testers.
So, for instance, there's a programmer that I respect a lot. The guy's named Gary Bernhardt. He has some wonderful educational series on really deep fundamentals of computer programming. And in order to prepare those things, he has to do a lot of video recording and audio recording. And he's, I believe, a pretty thorough checker of his own work. And he tweets about how the tools that he's using to assist him with this are driving him crazy. And it's really wonderful to see at least one person saying, hey, this stuff is really hard and irritating. And a lot of the stuff that's supposed to make things really, really easy doesn't work. And a lot of the new stuff that comes along to make it easier still introduces new problems of its own. And
remember when we spent 4 hours trying to get Cucumber to work, Michael, on your system? And then we had to reinstall Ruby and it messed up we never did get it working. And then the funny thing is when people who really like Cucumber say, oh, well, you're just not competent. Yeah, right. I've been a programmer, a production developer. I worked at Apple Computer. I was on the Borland C++. I was on the Borland C++ team, and you're saying I'm an incompetent programmer. Well, there must be lots of incompetent programmers in the world then if I can't get this thing running. So there's a lot of denial in our industry about how fiddly this stuff is and how hard it is to get it to work. What we think we need to do is display to people, to management, to our clients, what's really going on so that we can start understanding the true cost of these processes and the true value of these processes. We want to get credit for the real good testing that we're doing, and we want to, not be dinged for things that aren't our fault.
All right. So I think that's a really good way to wrap up. Somebody said that basically you guys need to write a book that's called The Secret Life of Testers.
Someday.
That would be a great title for a book. Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you both for doing this, for illuminating what testopsies are. I think this is really important, being able to actually, like you said, just on occasion dissect the things that you're doing and look deep into that. You can gain a lot of insights from that. So I'm really happy that we were able to take that concept and share it. So thank you both for doing this. Do you have anything you want to say before we end the broadcast?
Thanks for inviting us to do this.
Thank you for inviting us to do this. And if you have any questions, we are accessible. James at satisfice.com, Michael at developsense.com. We love answering questions. We love having conversations with testers. We're also accessible on Twitter at James Marcus Bach, at Michael Bolton. And we're available on Skype. James is Satisfice. I'm Michael.A.Bolton.
I don't do Twitter fights anymore, by the way. So don't challenge me to a Twitter fight. I'm not doing it.
Any means you choose. We are delighted to hear from people. People assume that we're busy. Yep, we are. We're busy trying to help people.
But we're interruptible.
It's the kind of that kind of busy is the kind of busy work we love. So please keep in touch.